I, like many of you, really enjoy the Antiques Roadshow. It is one of our favourite programmes. It's easy and enjoyable to watch. This piece on slavery stood out to me.
But this ivory bangle here is not about trading in ivory. It's about trading in human life.
Yes.
I was brought up with Martha, who had been a slave on the East African Arab Swahili slave trade, 100 years after this period that Ronnie is talking about. The BBC has a responsibility when it tells its stories to set it in context of time, and anyone who watched this programme would be justified not to understand that slavery existed everywhere at this period. Indeed, slavery has existed since the dawn of human history. All cultures, civilisations, skin colours, almost without exception across the world. Nearly 9,000 years ago, the first written account of slavery in Mesopotamia, today's Iraq. The origins of the word slave goes back to the 9th century when the Muslims, the Moors of the Iberian Peninsula, today's Spain and Portugal, captured Slavs from Central Europe for sale, hence the term slave.
This is an amazing object and a testament to the callous trade that went on in the 17th, 18th and into the 19th century.
Over this period that Ronnie has just mentioned, there were over 1 million white Christian slaves in North Africa, being equally brutally treated. Indeed, here, the men would often be castrated, something I don't believe happened on the transatlantic slave trade. So to speak as if the transatlantic slave trade was unique was at best a distortion of the complex slavery story in human evolution.
The abolition of Slavery Act wasn't until 1833.
What Ronnie is referring to here only applied to the British Empire, with the exception of India. Slavery continued elsewhere across the world. Britain's struggle to abolish slavery started at the height of the Napoleonic Wars, when the British Parliament found time to pass the 1807 and 1811 Abolitionist Slavery Acts. As Britain was on the winning side, it was able to add anti-slavery conditions to the 1850 Treaty of Vienna, forcing the other European nations to end their slavery. This was rigorously enforced by the British Navy, a major part for which it often doesn't receive recognition. Up to 10 ships of the Navy were stationed along the coast of West Africa to disrupt the slave trade. The 1833 Slavery Act only applied to the areas of the world that Britain controlled. In the 1850s, the British attacked Lagos and destroyed slaving facilities, having tried in vain to persuade King Dosimo to stop slave trading. In 1861, when the king attempted to revive the slave trade, Britain annexed Lagos as a colony as the only way of suppressing it.
So we've got written here, Prince Jemmy of Grandy, Bonnie, a good trader.
We're thinking that Prince Jemmy may have been an African himself, trading in people.
That's what I think, a despicable human being. I think he was an indigenous trader, somebody from Nigeria. He wouldn't have been trading in his own people. It was another nation, another tribe.
To isolate Prince Jenny as a despicable human being overlooks the fact that slave trading was endemic, part of the African and cultural way of life. Writing in the 1730s, West Africa, William Snelgrove tells us that sacrificing one's enemies being the usual custom of the country of any conquest, we observed the ceremony by the king of Dahome's forces, when the men to be sacrificed went to the side of the stages, bold and unconcerned. The executioner stood behind the victim with a broadsword, who struck the victim at the nape of the neck with such force that the head was severed at one blow from the body. But the cries of the poor women and children, as they were to be executed, were very moving, and much affected the Dutch captain and myself. It had always been the custom of their nation, after any conquest, to offer a god a certain number of captives, which were chosen from the prisoners by the king himself, for they firmly believed if this was omitted, no more success would be attained. He said it's evident that the abundance of captives taken in war would be inhumanly destroyed if there wasn't the opportunity of disposing and selling them to Europeans, so that many lives are saved and great numbers of those useful persons kept alive. They are carried to the plantations. They generally live much better lives there than they did in their own country, for as the planters pay a great price for them, it is in the planters' interest to take care of them.
Then we have the name of a ship here, don't we?
Ship Anna,
Ship Anna and a date, 1782.
yes. And on that particular ship, there were 535 slaves.
Probably all stacked on top of each other.
Yeah, yeah.
And transported across the Atlantic for months on end.
We have to remember at this time that Ronnie is talking about, sea travel was a precarious business no matter who you were. In 1750, Mittelberg embarked on a ship called the Osgold, carrying 500 fellow Germans. And he went on to describe in one of the most powerful travel journals ever written, but of the Atlantic journey, there is on board these ships terrible misery, stench, fumes, horror, vomiting, many kinds of seasickness, fever, dysentery, headache, heat, constipation, boils, scurvy, cancer, mouth rot, and the like, all of which come from old and sharply salted food and meat. Also, there is very bad and foul water, so that many die miserably. Children from 1 to 7 rarely survived the journey. During Wittenberg's own journey, 32 children died, and their bodies were buried at sea.
My great-grandmother was a returned slave from Nova Scotia in Canada and came back to Sierra Leone and Freetown. And I actually think it's my cultural duty, our cultural duty, to talk about things like this.
I totally agree with Ronnie, but let's tell a balanced slavery story. As I've mentioned, slavery is a hugely complex story of the human evolution. I have huge respect for Ronnie Archer Morgan, but regarding the returned slaves from Nova Scotia to Sierra Leone and Freetown, he will know Alexander Falconbridge and the part he played. His widow, Anna Marie, in 1794, published her narrative of 2 voyages to the river Sierra Leone, and her account of travelling on a slave ship from West Africa to Jamaica, saying she was agreeably disappointed in her expectations. The slaves were well treated, allowed to stay on deck all day. Their provisions were excellent, and great attention was paid to the sick. For a long time I viewed the slave trade with abhorrence, considering it a blemish on every civilized nation that countenanced or supported it. The slaves to whom she saw in Jamaica seemed vastly well satisfied, far better off than the labouring poor in England. I wish freedom to every creature formed by God who knows its value, she said. So what I'm saying is this is a complex issue not being portrayed in a balanced way by stories such as this on the Antiques Roadshow. Please give a balanced narrative.
And I just love you for bringing it to the roadshow, and thank you so much for making me so sad.
I'll keep on researching it
Yeah.
and find out exactly who Prince Jemmy was.
As a footnote, I raised a complaint to the BBC about the portrayal of the slave trade in this Antiques Roadshow. The complaint system restricts us to about 2,000 characters, which is about 320 words, which makes it quite difficult to get your point across. I received a generalised response from the BBC complaints team, not answering my specific points. And that really left me no alternative, I felt, than to produce a video trying to lay out my points. The BBC quite simply are not interested. The other point I want to make is I am totally against slavery in every sense of the term form. But as Ronnie said to us, we have a duty to tell the story, but we have a duty to tell a balanced story, and this is not happening in stories such as this on the Antiques Roadshow. So you can judge for yourselves. Now follows the unedited Antiques Roadshow story.
One of the darkest chapters in our history is the transatlantic slave trade, and it can be difficult to see and talk about items connected to it. Ronnie Archer-Morgan has spotted a curious disc that acted as a kind of endorsement of the professional reputation of an African slave trader in the West African port of Bonny in the 18th century.
I want to make it absolutely clear that myself and we in the Antiques Roadshow wholly and unequivocally disapprove of the trade in ivory. But this ivory bangle here is not about trading in ivory. It's about trading in human life.
Yes.
And it's probably one of the most difficult things that I've ever had to talk about. But talk about it we must.
Yes.
This is an amazing object and a testament to the callous trade that went on in the 17th, 18th, and into the 19th century. So tell me how you got this object.
I used to work for a family looking after them, and one of the members passed away, and they were having a house sale, and I bought that 36 years ago in the house sale for £3. I thought it looked interesting. I had no idea what it was.
What made you keep it for 30 odd years?
There was something about it, and now I'm researching it. If it said traders, I thought it meant trading in coffee or spices, but actually I realised they were trading in people.
So we've got written here, Prince Jemmy of Grandy, Bonny, a good trader.
We're thinking that Prince Jemmy may have been an African himself, trading in people.
That's what I think, a despicable human being. I think he was an indigenous trader, somebody from Nigeria. He wouldn't have been trading in his own people. It was another nation, another tribe. Then we have honest fellow.
Yeah.
I'd like to meet him and teach him how honest I think he is. These objects are really rare. I know of the existence of about half a dozen of these only. It's extraordinary. I mean, this is a document, the living proof, in a way, the surviving proof that this awful trade went on. And look how beautiful the calligraphy is. The beauty of the calligraphy, it just belies the awfulness of the message. Then we have the name of a ship here, don't we?
Ship Anna.
Ship Anna and a date, 1782.
Yes. And on that particular ship, there were 535 slaves.
Probably all stacked on top of each other.
Yeah, yeah.
And transported across the Atlantic for months on end.
From Bonny to Montego Bay.
And Bonny is now in Nigeria.
Yeah.
The abolition of Slavery Act wasn't until 1833, spearheaded by William Wilberforce. So this is long before that. This is over 50 years in advance of that, when the trade was rife.
Yes.
You know, my great-grandmother was a returned slave from Nova Scotia in Canada and came back to Sierra Leone and Freetown. And I actually think it's my cultural duty, our cultural duty, to talk about things like this. I just don't want to value it. I do not want to put a price on something that signifies such an awful business. But the value is in the lessons that this can tell people. The value is in researching this and what we can find out. And I just love you for bringing it to the roadshow, and thank you so much for making me so sad.
I'll keep on researching it
Yeah.
and find out exactly who Prince Jemmy was. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, you'll let us know, I hope.
I will.